Okay, hi and welcome. Many of you have already met Nick. You might not have seen him very well the first time. He's back and he has some awesome light on in the background so we can see him today. And today we're actually going to talk a little bit more about HOMA-IR, and then we are going to do another video on exercise, so you're not going to miss out on that. But if you really want to know who Nick is, I think that you should go back and watch the first video I did with him on inflammatory hysteresis, where he's talking about who he is. So over to you, Nick. Let's see what you have to say about HOMA-IR and what I had to say about it. Ooh.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pim. I was just telling you off mic as we were preparing for this that I was very impressed with that HOMA-IR. It was a natural follow-up to what we were talking about in inflammatory hysteresis. Is that screen now shared? Can people see that?
Oh yes.
Now?
Yeah, we started
So
with
that.
I forgot to get it away.
Yeah, thanks. We talked about this particular graph. So if people want to go and find out what inflammatory hysteresis is, please go and see Pim's earlier podcast or video, whatever you want to call it, on this.
Yeah, I can link back to it in the video as well.
Great. But yeah, it was great because there were lots of questions coming in from people, really relevant ones. And I just thought I'd just do a quick 15, 20 minutes or whatever,
Awesome.
just to address that, because I'm really impressed with the fact that you've taken not only the insulin resistance on board, but the inflammatory hysteresis as well, and how important this is, and how this manifests itself way before type 2 diabetes does, or even elevated blood sugar. So your follow-up was great. And there was several questions from people. I just wanted, in no particular order, I wrote some points down. The first one is inflammatory hysteresis diagnosis. So when do you know that you've got inflammatory hysteresis? Nobody really asked that, but I'm just going to reinforce the point that inflammatory hysteresis is very difficult to reverse insulin resistance, or impossible to reverse insulin resistance. How do you know that you've got that? Well, you don't until time has elapsed. So you can't say it with one measurement. You can't do one HOMA-IR measurement and say this person has hysteresis. You can maybe assume that they have, but it's not until you do a second or a third over a period of time that if the HOMA-IR is still elevated over the course of several months, that you can start to suspect hysteresis, or even irreversible hysteresis. And of course, irreversible, you will never know until you look into the rear view mirror. Is it irreversible? And I would never assume that inflammatory hysteresis is irreversible. I think you're on a bound to try and reverse it. You shouldn't say, oh, I've got irreversible insulin resistance and hysteresis, and therefore I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to give up. I don't think that's what you should do. I think you should keep going and work hard in the gym, work hard on your lifestyle, reduce stress, make sure you've got no cortisol in your system, etc., etc. And who knows, something may happen and suddenly you become insulin sensitive again. And if I can just switch over to this here, let me just bring up my forum.
Mm-hmm.
Because client A in my forum is a typical example. If we go to help, I have inflammatory hysteresis. And
so if you haven't signed up yet, I think that you should go to his website and sign up for the forum and just read up about it if you want to know more about this or other things, because there are some good things on there. Just saying.
So this is the client A story on my blog. Let me just duplicate that. And then I can find her story.
Mm-hmm.
Here she is. Okay, so this lady, mid-50s, started with me. She's been with me. She's a long-term client. Started with me nearly 2.5 years ago. Has been with me ever since I started, and she was severely overweight, as you can see. She doesn't want her name to be known, but she was about 25 kilos overweight, and we discussed her in the last podcast. And she is really the person that has supported my theory because on inflammatory streaks, because I have such a long track record now of her bloods and her training that confirmed my theory that I already had about inflammatory hysteresis. She was severely overweight. Her weight came down very nicely within about 6 months. As you can see here, she lost about 25 kilos, did really well in the gym, and her story is here. That's on the blog post. But then in the forum, on the follow-up, I posted her bloods, and she posted in May last year her comments on finally becoming insulin sensitive, and here are her bloods. And if you look down at the bottom here, can you see that?
Yep.
There are her HOMA-IR scores. Her initial one was, it's not on here, but I think it was well over 3.4.
Wow.
And then we had 28th of July, it dropped to 2.9. 21st of that was in 2017, and then 21st of March 2018 it was 1.9. It wasn't until June last year that we finally got insulin sensitivity, as you can see there, 0.9.
And the majority of that clearly came from her insulin levels, because her fasting glucose wasn't that high.
She's had normal glucose throughout. Look at that HbA1c, borderline 5.9 here. She was borderline, sort of in the danger zone where a doctor would say, hey, we're going to look at this and suspect type 2 diabetes. But
one thing I find interesting with her picture is that it's very clear that it's all central obesity.
Yes.
There's nothing on her legs, nothing on her arms, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's why waist height to me is so important.
Yeah.
For men and women, some say it gathers in different places on women. On certain women, it does. If you look at the Afro-Caribbean women, it tends to collect around the waist and the hips. Around the glutes and the legs, and that's okay actually. If you look at some of the oversized models, there's a famous oversized model. I forget her name. She's a big woman, but she has a tremendous waist height ratio. So she's not gathering fat in the wrong places at all. So she doesn't have any visceral fat. So it does matter where you gather it, and that's why waist height is so good. But anyway, going back to client A, as you can see how long this took to reverse and get down to insulin sensitivity. Triglycerides improving.
Yeah, do you see a strong correlation between the triglyceride HDL ratio?
That was the next point, because that was on your video.
Yes.
No.
I remember that one.
Look at this. Triglycerides HDL at her worst. 0.72. That's not bad. It could be better, but it's not bad, right? We're talking 0.8 is usually considered, or above is usually considered that you're heading towards, CVD and all that. So it's not that bad. But look at her insulin and look at her insulin units.
That's pretty much the only thing that actually stands out.
Yeah, exactly. So if she goes to a doctor and the doctor's not even looking at insulin, which they don't, they will not look at your insulin unless they suspect something. type 2 diabetes. They're not interested. And that will come to my other point, what one of your viewers said shortly. I'll come on to that, the pulsative thing about insulin. That this person, in the eyes of a doctor, was healthy.
Yeah. But if you look at her, she doesn't look healthy with the simple obesity.
She had GERD. She had the reflux at night. She was throwing up at night like I did when I was overweight. She had swollen ankles. Her joints were sore. She couldn't sleep properly. She's sweating. She had it all. She had it all except the diagnosis of type 2 diabetes. So I think we need to completely relook at what we call type 2 diabetes.
Yeah.
Because it's not just based on blood sugar. Insulin resistance, if you want to call somebody insulin resistant, you've got to be measuring the thing that makes you resistant. It's the insulin, stupid.
Yeah.
And this confirmed to me everything that I thought about inflammatory hysteresis. This is a classic example. Now, we have reversed it here. Okay?
Yeah, that's so obviously, so that was from 2017 to 19. So you have data for pretty much 2 years. And it is getting better slowly.
Yep.
What did you do something specific to get it to actually drop that much in the last year?
Very strict diet. She's meat and water, by the way. She went slowly. She started on a ketogenic diet with me, and slowly, as I was doing my meat and water thing, she was very encouraged to do that. She dropped all her dairy, and she's just she was having some salad, and she got to the point where she said, "I sod this. I don't need salad. I'm going to meat and water." And she went meat and water, and she's been very strict with that. And she's been very good in the gym. She has been with me now, like I say, nearly 2.5 years, and she has trained regularly with me. I'll go into the protocols in the next video of what we do, but we've also compressed the schedule with her. I talk about expanding and compressing the schedule. So for most people, it's once a week training, but if you have a person with stubborn inflammatory hysteresis, you can compress the schedule. And she is, I'm actually compressing the schedule with her this month. She's trained twice a week, every week this month, and I put her through all my 8 protocols, and she's done really well. She has responded really well. I'm not talking about the bloods now. I'm talking about the strength training, the figures. I can show you them. She is so well trained now that she can take it twice a week. Great. And you have to, hysteresis, when it's stubborn, you have to push hard, and you have to you have to make sure your diet is on point. You have to make sure you're not stressed. There's no cortisol raging through your body, and you have to come to the gym and work hard. And you can do it. We've done it. But it's taken 18 months.
So just out of interest, when I tried to do, I think I mentioned that last time, when I tried to go strict carnivore for a month, I got this weird depression thing happening. Did she have any problem going strict meat and water, or was that just working fine?
It was, like I said, it was a gradual process. She didn't jump into it with both feet. And so she went from the normal Western diet to a ketogenic, low inflammation diet, and then she slowly edged into meat and water, which is where she is now. And so she didn't jump in. It was a gradual process. And I think that's a pretty good thing to do. I don't know why you felt the way you did. Meat and water is probably not for everyone.
Possibly not.
But I don't think you need to be totally meat and water. If you don't have any hysteresis, inflammatory hysteresis, then you probably don't need to go that far. But I only recommend that meat and water for those with stubborn inflammatory hysteresis. And I do have other clients who do have stubborn inflammatory hysteresis with not quite as bad as this lady, but certainly elevated HOMA-IR. In that, remember we talked about the sticky zone?
Yep.
That sticky zone of 1 to 1.5, and that is coincident with having that extra weight around the waist.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing that. So that's that really. That's what I wanted to say about that. Then your next question, have you got anything on that before I go into triglycerides HDL? I think I've just covered that actually.
Yeah, pretty much.
Somebody asked
just with regards to CRP, I see that she only has one measurement there, but do you see anything on that? Because I'm having a little bit mixed feelings about how useful CRP actually is.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a red herring in a lot of ways. Okay. I've had clients who've had the flu or have been sick for other reasons. They go and do a blood test a week later and they got really high CRP. You've got to be really careful when you take it. Yeah. Because it can throw for all kinds of reasons. Yeah. You just have a little bit of, a little cold and you've suddenly got a dodgy CRP read. As you can see, there's only one there. She hadn't taken them before and it's quite low, as you can see. So yeah, I don't pay too much value to CRP. I think the triglycerides, HDL, HOMA-IR, and I'm just thinking as well, if she would have gone and had a blood done, let's say the day after she's had a gym session with you, probably be elevated just for that reason. Well, this is a good point, and a couple of my clients have mentioned that if you're going to have your bloods, make sure it's away from a gym session. Make sure it's after several days rest. It's important. What I'm saying is important when you take your bloods. Yeah. So yeah, let's stick with the insulin. And CRP is overrated to a certain extent. Yeah. Okay. I'm glad we agree on that then. Yeah, definitely. Okay, now you can move on if you want. Yeah, triglycerides HDL. Somebody asked you in the forum. Just to tie this one up. Somebody asked. Is triglycerides HDL a proxy for IR? No, because you can see here. Yeah. There you go. The answer is no. I don't have to make a video on it. It's there in black and white. Yeah. Okay. And I actually tweeted about that, and I think that my suspicion is. It's only my suspicion is that trig HDL will pop only when blood sugar starts to pop up to the upside. Okay. And then it will suddenly take off as blood sugar takes off. Just from what I'm seeing here with this lady and other clients, I don't have any clients who are formally type 2 diabetic or who have elevated blood sugars. So yeah. I can't say that yet. I'd love to have one. I'd love to have a formal type 2 diabetic come with elevated blood sugar and see how they respond to the training, but I haven't got one yet. But that's what I suspect. Cool. Okay. Yeah, I do too. But as you say, when it's just the insulin, it doesn't seem to be much that we, maybe use it as a measurement or another way of diagnosing type 2 diabetes, or looking at that. If you need that, I don't know. We need to completely if we have to give proper credence to insulin resistance that is happening before type 2 diabetes. Yes. Before the blood sugars pop. Yeah. We have to start getting on board with that, because once the blood sugars pop to the upside, so much damage has been done. Yeah, totally agree. And if we're measuring HOMA-IR and insulin, as this lady here we've been doing, then there's so much you can do. You can go to people and say, look, you can explain to them that you're becoming insulin resistant, and the next thing is that your blood sugars will pop, and then you're going to be formally diagnosed as a type 2 diabetic. Do you want that?
I think we know the answer.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so that's that one.
Yep.
Next
Okay.
one.
Next one. Is that metformin?
Metformin.
Yeah. Do we want to remove the screen now so we can see you better? Or not?
Yeah, we can come back to that though. We'll come back to that. I want to use that screen later. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I can add it again just so you can see it better. Yeah. Metformin,
Okay.
500 milligrams.
This is my, as I said in my blog post on hysteresis, I had a little bit of metformin left from my original prescription. And I am now officially back on metformin.
Okay.
Just to finish off this 100 tablets, I'm playing around. It's an informal study. I'm not taking high dose. When I was on my original study, I was high dose, so I was 1,500 milligrams a day, morning, midday, halfway through the day, and then in the evening. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm playing around with morning and evenings.
So do you want to just explain quickly why you're doing that? Because you look healthy and you have a good HOMA-IR.
I have a good HOMA-IR. It's 0.8. But I have clients and my wife as well who have a HOMA-IR of 0.5. And I think because of the way I've lived my life for 40 years plus, in a very shit way, that I do have some hysteresis and that I'm vulnerable to 0.8 popping to the upside. I'm not saying I'm going to be on metformin for the rest of my life. I'm just saying that I'm on metformin at the moment, just for my own personal studies. I have clients who are on metformin who are not diabetic. They're using it for blood sugar control, but they are slightly insulin resistant. They're in the sticky zone. And client A, who we've just been talking about, has been using berberine.
Yes, I'm glad you say that, because I'm very interested to hear what you had to say about the difference. Because from what I understand, berberine is maybe even more potent than metformin.
It may be. I can't say, but I can tell you what client A did. She, I think part of her success, if you read that in the forum, the thread in the forum about what she did, I think part of her success, a small part maybe only, was the fact that she went on to berberine for the last year or so.
Okay. She
went on to a very high dose, 1,500 milligrams initially, and that made her sick. And if you're going to go on to metformin or berberine, don't go in for high dose straight away. It does make you feel woozy. It does affect the stomach. I sort of broke myself into it over the first couple of weeks. I was on 500 milligrams and then I upped. And I didn't have any real problems apart from during the study, the 3-month study, I did get those woozy spells. I did get the signs and symptoms that they do warn about occasionally. Sometimes I felt quite woozy on high. On this low regime, I haven't had any of that at all.
Okay.
But the difference between metformin and berberine, in my mind, is that berberine, there are so many commercial brands out there. I think the quality is questionable, and you don't know what you're getting.
Yeah.
And the advantage with this, although I'm not in favor of drugs at all. I'm not telling people to take this drug at all. I'm just saying that if you're going to use something for blood sugar control, this is quality control. This has been quality control. You know what you're getting. So if you have inflammatory hysteresis and you want to deal, and you've done everything, as I said in the blog post, if you can switch back to the screen, to my desktop, thanks.
I can't choose window. You
No,
have to
I'll do
change
that.
room.
I'll do that. If you're struggling with hysteresis, then there's only really 4 things that I believe you can do, and I've highlighted them here. Some form of intermittent fasting. I'm not a fan of fasting, but I think if you've tried everything else, then yeah, you probably need to do it. Moving to a strict ultra low inflammation diet if not already there, so try meat and water. A short-term high intensity training cycle compression expansion, which I was doing with client A, various training protocols. And then finally, drug therapy using metformin. You can add berberine to that, but if you're that serious, then I would say go and see your doctor and get metformin, because at least you know what you're getting.
Why are you not a fan of fasting? I'm intrigued here.
Only because if you're forcing the fast and you're training, I think there's a conflict there, especially if you're training. I think you've got to be really careful. You can start using protein as a fuel source pretty quickly, and then you might be getting weaker. If you're not training and you're just sitting around, then maybe, yeah, that's fine. But people who go on to very long fasts, I think you also need to be careful there, because refeeding syndrome is real. And, you know, we do know that people who have been on long fasts and go back to eating can die.
What when you say long fast, what?
Well, refeeding syndrome, do you know what that is?
Not really.
Okay, refeeding syndrome, it was really became of prevalence when they liberated the concentration camps in former Germany, and they saw in Second World War Germany, and they saw the starving people in the concentration camps, and they gave them food. The first thing you want to do is give them food. They gave them food, and a lot of them died. That's refeeding syndrome. And if you go for a very long period, there is that maybe remote possibility, but people need to be aware of that.
What about a 3-day fast, for example?
3-day fast, I don't think that's a problem.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't think it, but there's people pushing it now.
Yeah.
It seems to be a competition now, especially on social media. How many days? Oh, I've done 2 weeks. Oh, you pussy, I've done a month.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't want to do a month, I don't think.
I'm not talking about 3 days. I'm talking about a week, okay. 2 weeks plus.
Okay. That's
pushing into a very deep zone that we don't really understand fully.
Okay.
So when I say intermittent fasting, it's like 2 or 3 days. And really, if you're insulin sensitive and you have no inflammatory hysteresis, I don't see why you need to do it.
Autophagy?
Sorry?
Autophagy?
Oh, well, okay. There is some argument that the liver starts cleaning itself out after a few days. Yeah. I've actually written about that. I don't know if there's any hard evidence that that's going to happen and that your liver improves. I don't know. I haven't followed the studies, but yeah, you could say that. And you probably get some effects after 2 to 3 days. But I'm talking now about the context of reversing inflammatory hysteresis, breaking through the metabolic barrier of insulin resistance. That's all I'm really interested in.
Yeah. Cool.
So that's that. That's the metformin side. Then there was another question about insulin being pulsative, and somebody came to you and said, "Well, my doctor says it's no good because it's pulsative." Well, it's just as pulsative on the long term as sugar is. And I've proved that in myself and my clients that it doesn't swing. If you're doing it every month, every 2 months or whatever, it doesn't swing in the short term, in the long term. It's a very reliable predictor, as I showed you with client A here. I just showed you anyway in the forum.
Yeah.
That her HOMA-IR, it's very good. It shows you that in my case, it stays steady. And I can see it's not pulsative. It's no more pulsative than long-term blood sugar is. That's why we do it fasting.
Yeah. Sure.
That's why we do fasting insulin. That's why we do fasting blood sugar. And it's perfectly good for HOMA-IR.
But even if it varies a bit, it doesn't matter if you are doing it on yourself consistently, because you will see in what direction it's moving, and that's probably what's most relevant anyway.
Yeah, and if you look at my results on the blog, you'll see, and I'm seeing it in my clients, that it is, if you're doing it on yourself, it's steady. It's steady, provided you don't change anything, it's steady, and if you do something, it goes up, if you do something, it goes down. But it's not, that doctor is talking about he's making out that it's pulsative all the time. And yeah, when you eat, it's going to be pulsative, but when you're fasting and you're taking regular fasting shots, screenshots of this thing, it behaves just in the same way as sugar. You get a good trend. You get to see whether you're insulin resistant or not. So I don't buy that argument, and I don't buy it because I've seen it. I've seen it myself, cool. that it's absolutely fine, provided you do fasting insulin, which we do. That's why we do fasting blood sugars and fasting cholesterol. So it's basal, so we get a good idea. So I'm not buying that argument at all. And I think HOMA-IR, HOMA-IR1, I don't know whether you know that there's a HOMA-IR2.
Yeah.
That goes into more detail than HOMA-IR1, and you need software for that. But HOMA-IR1 is perfectly adequate for day-to-day assessment of insulin resistance. It's not perfect, but it's more than adequate for you and me.
Yeah, but it's the same thing with all tests that you do. If I'm using my blood glucose meter, there might be a 5%, plus minus on every single measurement I do.
But this guy who was on your show said, I think he said, he's got IU of 14. Did he say 14? And you said bloody, your words were bloody hell, that's high. You said that's bloody high. And it is. And even if there's a 10% error, I think you said on that, that's still high. And it is still high. Yeah. And it's still going to give you a high HOMA-IR.
Yes. It's not going to be like his real value is 4 or 5. No. Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. And that's all you need to know.
Yeah.
Even if it throws by 10%, based on that and normal blood sugar, I can tell you now his HOMA-IR is well over 3. I don't have to do the calculation.
So you heard it here first. Don't listen to your doctors, just take the insulin test.
Explain to your doctor why. And the problem is that doctors haven't seen, they don't do insulin on a regular basis. They only do blood sugar on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So they don't get to see this, what I'm seeing.
So Nick, how are we going to spread the word to the world? How are we going to get it out there? How are we going to get people to start asking for this? Because it's clearly very important, I think.
It's hugely important.
It's something hidden that we don't really know about, that so many people will benefit from.
This is why I'm so happy to be on your show, Pim. You're one of the few people. You're one of the few people who's talking about there's a vacuum of knowledge that modern medicine hasn't touched. Modern medicine is only dealing with disease. It's only dealing with something it can see. It's only dealing with something when it's too late.
Yeah.
They're not preventative. They're not dealing with upstream problems. And insulin resistance is something you can see coming from miles away. If you're looking in the right place. And
I'll have you on again when I have 10,000 people here.
Sorry?
I'll have you on again when I have 10,000 followers.
I'd love to. I mean, I'm really grateful that you're doing this. And we just have to build it up and up. There's more and more people are following me on Twitter. That's my main anti-social media outlet.
Yes.
And it's shows like yours are starting to. Excuse me. Let me just open my blinds so I get more light in here.
Yeah,
the sun is coming
go ahead.
up.
It's fine. I'll just have a sip of water and. Again.
I'm glad to say that shows like yours, and when I was on Ivor Cummins' show, Fat Emperor, that was the first outing of inflammatory hysteresis. And I'm very grateful to people like you and Ivor and other people on Twitter who are spreading the word that this is, we're looking in the wrong place. And it's happening. It's happening. It's slow. It's slow, but Rome wasn't built in a day.
No.
And just keep going, Pim. I'll come on your show as often as you want if you want to talk about these things.
Yeah, once a week he will be here.
we could have a phone in once a week.
Yeah. Maybe I should. Maybe you should come on one of my live streams one time. I just have to change the time because that's usually 9 a.m. here, so that will be very late for you. But maybe we should do that so people can ask you questions live.
I'll be perfectly happy to do that.
Cool. So you all heard him. He said he would be happy to do that. We'll arrange that in a few weeks' time, maybe.
Make it happen, Pim.
Cool.
Okay, my final point from your video, just give me a sec.
Yeah.
Is inflammatory index.
Right. Yeah.
What is inflammatory index? Here. This leads to the question, is it possible to have a waist-height ratio greater than 0.5 yet a HOMA-IR score less than 1? Yes, it is. Because you can be carrying some visceral fat. Okay? I don't believe that there is a strict correlation between waist height and insulin resistance. I think you can be slightly over 0.5. And I do have clients who are carrying visceral fat and are very insulin sensitive, and they're just borderline about 0.51, 0.52, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And so I've come up with inflammatory index.
Yeah.
So that takes care of, don't worry if you have a little bit of extra fat around your waist that is subcutaneous, not visceral, subcutaneous fat.
Mm-hmm.
If you take your HOMA-IR and multiply it by your waist height ratio, so in theory, that's waist height ratio 0.5, HOMA-IR 1, multiply those two together.
Cool.
And you should have an inflammatory index of 0.5 or less, okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if you take the power lifter who has a large waist, 0.56, but he's got a HOMA-IR of 0.9, his inflammatory index is 0.5, he's okay.
Nice.
Okay. Then you take this, on the other end of the scale, you take the skinny diabetic, TOFI, thin on the outside, fat on the inside, and they have a waist of 0.5, but they have a HOMA-IR of 3.8.
Mm-hmm.
That gives them an inflammatory index of 1.71.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've thought of everything.
Good job, you.
Sorry?
Good job, you.
Thank you. So when people say to me, "Oh, I've got your waist height, you're putting too much emphasis on waist height ratio," and I'm carrying about 0.52, and my HOMA-IR is okay. I say, well, look at your inflammatory index. If it's 0.5 or less, you're okay. But of course, as soon as you start creeping up and up, you've still got to be careful that it doesn't start going up your waist height. And I think that as waist height starts to creep up, you'll start also seeing the insulin resistance go up with it.
So we can tell that he's an
That's
engineer.
Sorry?
We can tell that you're an engineer.
Yeah. So that's it, really. That's my comments on your excellent video on HOMA-IR. It was great. And I think your audience, I'm really impressed with your audience, who are very informed, obviously.
Yeah.
And
There are some
they
good questions there sometimes.
Sorry?
There are some really good questions there sometimes.
There are some great questions, and I think you're doing a great job, Pim. And I encourage you to keep going. I encourage you to follow Pim and sign up for her videos, because they are really informative and getting better, I think.
Well, that's good. Good to hear. I'm still finding my feet a bit. They started out with cravings management, which I'm still huge on because that's my thing. But with my background, it's really comfortable and easy for me to do the things that I'm doing now. And I guess that maybe that's why people appreciate it, because I already have so much knowledge and experience from that field that it's easy for me to put it out there, actually.
Yeah, it's good, and it comes across. It comes across, and let's keep going with this insulin resistance message. Get it out there, and
will do.
If you need me to come on, I'll just let me know.
Yeah, you're welcome any day. It's always interesting to talk to you.
Thank you. Same.
Okay, so we're just going to wrap it up there then, and we will be back very soon again with the next part on exercise. So see you then.